Hey, it's Adam with yet another What's New in MixEffect. Today we're going to talk about MixEffect 1.2.2, which comes right on the heels of MixEffect 1.2.1, which was released earlier this week. I found some bugs actually while making this video that I corrected, and so I submitted a release to Apple, and I hope by the time you watch this video, 1.2.2 is out. Let's just get started right away. This is the OSC Action Extravaganza release. Why is that? It's because I have added over 115 new actions to MixEffect that you can use from your Stream Deck or Companion to control your ATEM switcher. Here are all the things now that you can control from MixEffect and Companion. The application itself, auxiliary output, color generators, downstream keyers, Fairlight audio, macros, media player, MixEffect bus, multi-view, output, startup state, SuperSource, the switcher, transitions, and upstream keyers. So we're going to go through every one of those right now, all 140 actions. But before we do that, let me take a minute to talk about the MixEffect native companion module, which is developed by developer Johnny S. Diaz, and it's great. You don't have to remember all the arcane paths for the MixEffect OSC commands. You can just click on the menu, search for it, and then you find the command you want, and all of them parameters are specified in like menu, sliders, fields, and there's variables. It's great. We are updating this native module to support MixEffect 1.2.2. That will be out shortly. We're currently in phase 2 of the MixEffect OSC companion module and the MixEffect OSC support, and that is offering finer control of your ATEM switcher. Phase 3 will bring feedback. So the ability for MixEffect to actually send information back to Companion to say, hey, input 1 is in program, make it green. Input 2 is on preview, make it is on program, make it red. Input 1 is on preview, make it green. Things like that. So feedback is coming. It's not there yet, but I still think you can get a lot out of the OSC support in MixEffect 1.2.2. In phase 4 will be further refinement, adding some more esoteric features that you can do from MixEffect or from ATEM Software Control into OSC. So that's the roadmap for the companion module. Let's take a look at some of the actions. So these are the actions that you can use to control the MixEffect application itself. You can connect to a switcher. You can turn on remote web view, run shortcuts, change your switcher pages, go to a different switcher section, turn on video follows audio, and turn on view only mode. These are all OSC commands that were in previous versions of MixEffect. But what's new is auxiliary output. So the best way to do that is to show you a demo. So I'm going to go to my Mac Mini right here, and I have the what looks to be my 5D Mark IV Camera 1 input coming out of HDMI output number 2. And so I have here the Stream Deck, and I'm pointing to this command here. And if I can bring this, make it a little bigger for me, I'm on page 15 here, showing some controls for the DVD. I'm going to go to page 2. And so this is what I see on the Stream Deck here. And so this is basically controlling the auxiliary 2 output, which I'm bringing into my Mac. So I push this, I'm seeing the iPad. I can go to Media Player 1, Media Player 2, which is the background. I can see the SuperSource. I can do color bars, colors, and like that. So I'm going to go back to Media Player 1. And that's basically what the auxiliary set source command is in OSC. It's great. Color generators. So let's move to the next page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the color generators to color 2. And I'm going to go to the page. So you can see here, I basically said I have black, red, green, blue, orange, yellow, and teal. So you can see what happens if I push these buttons. I'm just changing the color generators that's being output from the ATEM. And if we actually look on the ATEM itself, so I'm going to bring in the iPad here, and I'm going to go to color generators right here. So we're changing color number 2. So if I just push red, you can see that the OSC command is telling the ATEM to set the color of the color generator. And right now I'm doing 2, but if I say number 1, I can also change color generator number 1. So that is color generators. Let's go back to the Mac Mini. Downstream keyers. So the downstream keyer, I'm going to bring actually the iPad back. Go to this page here. And there's an auto button, which will just bring in the MixEffect logo down in the bottom left-hand corner. And so I can make it go, make it fade in slower, do it 30 frames, see it goes slower. I'm going to change it to 15 frames. I can set the rate, okay? Now what's cool also is that I can set the mask. So we take a look at the downstream keyer controls here. The mask is currently off. But if I push this button, which is mask toggle, I've just turned on the mask. And now if I want to adjust the bottom, I can just do plus, 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 and you can see that the MixEffect logo is being cropped. And if I want to do the top, I can do it like this, and you can see it's cropped there. If I do left, crop it like that, and move the right in. Again, this is just an example of using the mask controls right there. If I want to reset, all I have to do is push mask reset. And these are commands that I've coded in using the OSC dictionary that MixEffect exposes, which you can see at the mixeffect.app/docs/OSC website. Let me bring that up real quick. So that's right here. I have complete documentation on how to control your ATEM using OSC, including how to configure it, how to add buttons, and all the messages. I recently redid the documentation, so it's a lot easier to read and understand. I hope you enjoy learning all the different things you can do. 140 actions again. So if we come back to my iPad, I will just toggle the mask off, and you can see in the downstream keyer, the mask is off. I can also set the pre-multiply field by just pushing that. See, that's set. If I don't want to pre-multiply it, I can do that. I can invert, which will do that. And then I can change the clip and gain if it's not pre-multiplied using fine controls. I'm going to turn on the pre-multiply since it is a good graphic with a alpha transparency. So that is the downstream keyers. Fairlight audio. Let's take a look at this. So one thing that I always have problems with is that I have the audio frame delay sometimes gets reset to 0 on my ATEM. I really like it at 8. And we can take a look here. I'm going to bring this up here, switch to my next screen. I can set the audio frame delay to 0 by just pushing it. And you can see right here that the frame delay is now at 0 and my voice might be out of sync. But if I push frame delay 8, I should be back in sync. So I've set the audio frame delay back to 8. I can also do things like adjust the input. Input gains at 3. That's a little high. I'm going to set it down to 2. I'll keep it at 3 since I'm actually recording this video. But I can change the fader gain like this. And I can reset it by just pushing this button here. Macros. So here is an interesting button, the macro loop button. So you see here up here in the upper right, if you have this turned on, basically any macro that you run will run over and over again. So if I'm in my multi-view and I say preview is my camera and I push this auto button here, which is actually macro button number 1, so I can push macro 1 here, you'll see that I'm auto transitioning back and forth. But I also have a macro button that's stop. I can just push this and it'll stop the transition. Now I'm back to here. And if I just push loop, turn off the loop, and I can push this macro and it'll just do an auto transition, another auto transition. If you have a macro that waits for user input, there's also a continue, macro continue button, which you can code into your Stream Deck and companion. Okay, I'm going to take out that downstream keyer. I'm going to move to the next section. So media players, this is a way for you to set the media clips of your media. I don't have anything set right now that I want to demonstrate because this is a feature that was already in MixEffect before. So moving right along, new actions in the MixEffect bus, you can do the fade to black and you can set the preview and program inputs. So this is actually a great use case for having feedback, which again is coming in phase 3, because if you set the preview input, and let's actually bring back the Mac, go back to SuperSource, go back to this one, swipe over here, and let's change the auxiliary output to the multi-view. So if I wanted to use these buttons here and set the preview input to say 2, you can see it changing in the bottom quadrant, bottom right quadrant. Set it to 3, set it to 1. There's no feedback on the actual Stream Deck. That's because we're not sending that. Ideally, it would be highlighted in green, so I know that, oh, input 1 is in preview, so that when I push auto, it will do the auto transition and then highlight the other buttons. Now that SuperSource is in preview, that should turn green. Again, something that's coming in phase 3 of the native companion module and MixEffect. So stay tuned for that. Multi-view. So we were just looking at my multi-view here. We bring up the multi-view controls. So over here, I have basically a grid of all the 16 layouts that you can do. And actually, let's go fast forward to that section. There we are. Bring back my multi-view here. So I just push these buttons. You'll see that the multi-view is changing. I'll just run through all 16. So this is a great way if you have different multi-view layouts that you switch between, you can configure that. There's also an action to set the multi-view window right here. So you can set like window 1 to preview and window 2 to program. But I found it's kind of weird. The window IDs kind of change depending on what layout you're in. So I find using a shortcut is actually better for controlling your multi-view. And I have a shortcut right here that will set the defaults. So if I can run this, I'm going to run this and show you what the multi-view changes to on the Mac, which has the multi-view display. So I'm going to run the shortcut again. You can't see this because it's running a different one, but I just run this and it just changes my inputs. And what's great about the shortcut is that you can just, if you want to change something, you can just go into the action and say, okay, default, I want to set, program top is the layout, and you got the 16 layouts right here. And you can say, source top left is preview, program, and then all the layouts are right there. It's very easy to see. And actually, if we look at settings, multi-view, and if we run this shortcut again, you can see how this all changes. So I'm going to change it to default. It changes the layout and all the windows. It's a lot easier than having to redo a macro to do that by using a shortcut. So strongly encourage you to take a look at shortcuts. Output, it's the ability to set the recording file name, start, stop a recording, switch disks, and also set a streaming service, including the server URL, the stream key, and the service name. And then you can also start and stop streaming. Switcher, you can also save a startup state and clear the startup state just from a button. Very dangerous to use, so be careful if you do add that to your companion interface. SuperSource, let's take a look at SuperSource. A bunch of changes here, and let's actually bring this up a little bigger and bring me in. I've added commands for adjusting the SuperSource art and the border and border enable. Those are only features available if you have a 2ME Production Studio 4K, 4ME Broadcast Studio 4K, or Constellation 8K. Does not work on the ATEM Mini Extreme or Mini Extreme ISO, the border. You can set the art, the key, pre-multiplied key. You can adjust the clip and gain. I showed you that before with the downstream keyer. You can also set whether the SuperSource art is in the foreground or in the background, and you can enable boxes. The other SuperSource commands, which are in white, previously existed in MixEffect. I'm actually going to do a demo because they're actually kind of cool. So if we take a look at this one, this is the SuperSource Box Position kind of page that I have created, and I can just move my boxes up and down just by pushing these buttons, as you can see right here. Just moving it up and down. So you can just do finely control your boxes. Box 2 is this one, like that. And then we also have swap controls. So if I go to this one, I can make the boxes smaller altogether, or I can make them bigger, okay? I can swap boxes. So This is actually not swapping because I actually have a box that's hidden in the background. But I know this is box 1 and 3, I think. Nope, it's 1 and 2. So I can push this 1 and 2 button and it will swap my sources. I can also highlight. I want to highlight number 1. Now, if you saw what happened there was it actually flipped back to the original layout, which was the preset that has me in the upper right and then the kind of Apple TV in the big space. But if I do the highlight like this, I can do it like that, like this, or reset the button. But again, remember, if you do swap and then you try to highlight, it's actually going to revert back to the way the SuperSource preset was set. That's just how it's coded. So be on the lookout for that. SuperSource show controls. So this layout is actually what I do when what I use when I run shows. So I basically kind of set out how I want my show to run, and I just go through each of those presets. So like intro, start the camera on me, and then I might go to a 2-up with lower thirds, and then go back to the 2-up, a 2 crop. I might want to switch presets kind of with these 2 buttons down here. If I push this, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see what the next preset is. So it looks like it was just the media player 2, which is currently in the background. So I use this during my shows. I make a different one for each show, and when I'm doing it, I just push buttons. That's how I'm able to do my shows very quickly. So let's move on. Transitions. This is a great one. So basically you have fine control over pretty much all the transition commands. You can change the rate, you can change the dip source, you can change the dip values, mix values, DVE, and the pattern or the wipe. So we're going to do an example of changing the wipe. So if we take a look at the iPad here, we're going to go into the transitions area here, and we see that mix is currently the set one. So I'm going to change this to dip, and if I just hit auto, it does a dip auto. But we want to play with the wipe. What's great about the wipe, you have, I think, 17 different commands or different types of wipes. So right now it's set to this kind of like, I don't know, barn door type thing, like that. But I can easily just push a button on the Stream Deck right here, and you see that it sets that one. Now it's like that. You can set this. It's like that. Let's go to the foregrid, like that. So actually, like ATEM, they actually make a hardware control surface for your switchers. They actually have physical buttons that look exactly like this. So you can like push them and then set the wipe transition. But now you can do it from a Stream Deck. It's great. Do that circle one. Here we go. But I prefer mix personally, so I'm going to set it back to mix. So that's the transitions. Actions. Upstream Keyers. Let's go back to this screen here. A lot of functions that you can do with the Upstream Keyers in OSC and MixEffect now. You can set the chroma sample. So if you have like a series of chroma backdrops, you can set it's this green, or maybe it's like a blue backdrop, or like the shade of green is a little different because you have different lights. You can kind of code those all in. DVE borders and the masks, and we're going to show demos of this. Adjusting the flying key, setting flying keyframes, running the flying key, all powerful and all possible. So let's take a look here. So DVE, USK mask size and position. So let me move to this one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to the iPad. And I don't have a DVE set up right now because I usually use SuperSource. But if you have like an ATEM Mini Pro or ATEM Mini Pro ISO and you want to control your DVE, this is actually a great way to do that. So for instance, let's bring in a DVE. Let's see, the DVE is currently the Mark IV. I'm going to change this to color bars. I'm going to make it go on air. And you can see it just popped up right there. So I'm going to move it with my finger using MixEffect like that. I'm going to turn off the border as well, just from the interface here. Now, from the Stream Deck, I can move it up and down like this. So let's say I want it in the corner there. Okay. And let's say I want to have a mask to it. I only want to show a certain part of it. So we look in MixEffect, we see that the mask is currently disabled, but I have a mask toggle button and I just turned it on. So I'm going to say mask, let's say mask, cut it like that, like that, that, and like that. So I want that square. Then let's say I want to move it like there. You can adjust kind of like how much it moves based on what you send in the OSC command. So I'm just going to move it a little bit like this with my finger. So that's the way I like it. And there you go. I actually make it bigger or smaller as well. So you have control over how the size, position, and mask of the DVE. Next thing is the flying key and pip controls that I have in this example here. So let's say we created a bunch of DVE pips. And so we just kind of push them like this. I'm going to push this. And now it gets set. Now you see that there's a mask around it because you don't see the other command. So I'm going to actually remove the mask by resetting it. And you can see that's where it is. It's kind of a large DVE, but I have different buttons. I'm just pushing them to change the placement. So you can create your whole set of DVE presets with like different video input sources, and with a push of a button, just recall it like that. And with the flying key, you can actually make them move in, kind of like a pseudo SuperSource. So for instance, in here, I'm going to push the Set A button, and I'm going to push this button to set it down there, and I'm going to push the Set B. And with the flying key, now I can make them move. I'm going to push this Run A button, which is in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to say Run to the B, Run to the A. I'm going to make it disappear, and I'm going to make it reappear. And then say I wanted B to be down here, I can say Set B, and then Run A, and then Run B. So from MixEffect, OSC, and the Stream Deck, now you can kind of have buttons where you can have pre-programmed presets for your DVE. It's something that I've wanted to add to MixEffect itself, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I think as an intermediate step, you can use the Stream Deck with its, buttons to create your own presets. So the next thing is the Luma key mask and position. So the DVE has its own mask settings. It shares the same settings of the size and position, because that's the flying key with Luma, Chroma, and pattern. But the mask is slightly different. So I'm going to turn off this DVE, and I'm going to turn on the Luma. And I don't know what this is going to look like. We're going to see real quick. I'm going to turn it on. And let's actually make the Luma a color bars. So bring that on. Oh, there we go. It's kind of big. First thing I want to do is reposition it. So we're actually going to make it a little smaller. Oh, I know why. It's because the flying key has been disabled. So we got to turn that on first. So flying key on. There we go. Now I can move it around. Okay, so the size is, what does it say on MixEffect? The size is 0.3. So I can move this flying key around. Now this is a chroma key. So we can actually this is a Luma key. So let's actually make it a chroma key. And let's set it to bars again. So you see the green is chromaed out. Okay, that's what a chroma key does. Like that. And I can toggle the mask, make it appear like that, or change the mask. So if I want to set the top, just keep pushing this button down. Let's actually find the mask settings. Here, oh, mask is off actually. And you can see I can do like this. I can reset the mask with one button push, and like that. So a lot of power. Encourage you to take a look at that. That's actually a brief overview of all the new actions that are in MixEffect 1.2.2. Again, there's over 115 new actions that you can control your ATEM switcher from MixEffect and OSC. So I encourage you to take a look at all of them, because I think it can really improve your video productions. So let's go back to the slides and talk about some of the newer features. I'm going to move that Luma key. Duplicate preset. So if you're in the SuperSource, and if we can go back to the iPad, if you're in the SuperSource area here and you long press and you can choose duplicate, it will actually bring up the edit preset sheet for the newly created presets. You can change the name, add tags, change the box sources and whatnot. It's great. It's much faster. There's some improvements or actually some fixes and shortcuts. So the multi-view commands had a bug where if you didn't set the toggle for the layout, it would give you an error. That's been fixed. And upload still, I just removed an action parameter because you didn't need it when you're uploading stills. iOS 15 is out. I don't know if you've upgraded. I've upgraded my phone to iOS 15, but my iPad Pro is still running iOS 14. There's some user interface kind of quirks that you may have seen if you're running an earlier version of MixEffect on iOS 15. I'm slowly working my way through them. I hope to add some more iOS 15 specific features to MixEffect in the future, but I think I'll be continuing to support iOS 14 for quite some time. There's been some bug fixes. The downstream keyer had a set all settings bug where if you push this button, it would set all the settings except for the value of tie on air button. So now that has been fixed. When you push the set all settings, it will set the tie and the on air. And you use the set all settings when you're recording macros. So you just, instead of having to like touch each parameter to get it to be recorded into the macro, you can just push the set all settings button and it will take all the values of the tie, the on air, the rate, the fill source, the key source, the mask, and the pre-multiplied. And if you have it turned off, the clip, the gain, and the invert key settings and record that straight into the macro. It's fantastic. Similarly, I've done the same thing with the Upstream Keyer. Before, it would change all the settings here except for the values of background, key, and on air. So now when you click the set all settings button, it will not only take all these settings into account and code them into the macro, it will also set the on air, key, and background and what Upstream Keyer you're actually using, chroma, luma, pattern, or DVE. There was a slowdown that some of you may have seen if you use MixEffect in a split view. If you're in the grid view, this view all presets grid view, and you were trying to like rearrange this, it would be really slow. But now that's been fixed, so you don't have to worry about that. It's very fast now. Finally, if you're running MixEffect on an Apple Silicon Mac, it's like an M1 Mac Mini, the pickers now work properly. So there's some, again, user interface differences between iOS and macOS, and iOS running on macOS on Apple Silicon that I have to take into account. So some pickers weren't actually updating their values, but now that should be fixed. If it hasn't been fixed, please leave a comment in the comments below and I will get right to it. So that's all the features in MixEffect 1.2.2. There's certainly a lot of them in OSC Action Extravaganza. I hope that you, if you have a Stream Deck, that you take a look at all the things that you can control because it's a lot, and it will definitely improve your video production skills. And if you don't have a Stream Deck, I strongly encourage you to get one. They're really great. They come in 3 different sizes. It's got like a small 6 button, a 15 button, and then the 32 buttons. You can never have enough buttons. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and like the video. It really helps. I've passed 1,000 subscribers and now I'm working my way towards 4,000 watch hours viewed, which will allow me to monetize the channel. But I really appreciate everyone watching this video and the people who use MixEffect. Just hearing the stories of how you're using it in your production, how it's up-leveling your productions is really great. So keep those stories coming. And I will see you next time for another video on either how to use MixEffect or a video on what's new in a newer version of MixEffect. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.